Rania Alide was a 25-year-old mother of 3 living in Salford, Greater Manchester. To neighbors she appeared calm, polite, and quietly ambitious, the image of a young woman building a better life for her children. But within her marriage to Ahmed al-Khatib, the walls were closing in. Family friends later described him as deeply controlling, a man who wanted to dictate every part of her daily routine, from the way she dressed to the people she spoke with. Over time Rania's confidence began to return. She enrolled in English classes, met new friends, and even considered a career of her own. For the first time, she was planning a future that didn't depend on her husband's approval. Those small steps of independence became the spark that changed everything. Ahmed's jealousy deepened. Arguments turned more heated. Rania confided to her relatives that she wanted to leave him, to take her children and start again. Then, in late June 2013, Rania suddenly disappeared. Her phone stopped answering, her social media accounts went silent, and her family, who had spoken to her almost every day, could not reach her. When she failed to attend a scheduled visit, relatives contacted Greater Manchester Police. Within hours, officers realized something was very wrong. A missing person case quickly escalated into a major investigation. Detectives examined phone records, CCTV from roads around Manchester, and vehicle data that traced the couple's movements. Piece by piece, the story emerged. Rania had been killed after an argument at home. Her husband then transported her body hundreds of miles south toward the A19 corridor. Ahmed al-Khatib was arrested soon after. During questioning he denied involvement, but forensic evidence, witness statements, and GPS data told a different story. At trial, prosecutors described a pattern of control and emotional abuse that had lasted for years, ending when Rania finally decided to live on her own terms. In 2014, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 20 years before possible parole. The judge called the crime a selfish act of domination, committed to silence a woman who simply wanted independence. Today, Rania's family continues to raise awareness about domestic control and the warning signs that often appear long before violence. Her case is studied across the UK as an example of how jealousy and control can escalate from threats to tragedy, and how crucial it is for victims to seek help early. Rania Alide's story isn't just another headline in Britain's crime history. It's the story of a woman who tried to reclaim her life, and a system that learned, too late, the cost of ignoring her cries for freedom. For 16 years, Lakhvir Kaur Singh and Lakhvinder Chima lived a secret life together. They were lovers who met in Southall, West London, their relationship hidden from their families and the world. For more than a decade the affair survived arguments, reconciliations, and quiet promises that they would one day be together openly. But by 2009, everything had changed. Chima had decided to move on, leaving the past behind to begin a new life with a younger woman. To Lakhvir, that decision was unthinkable. Friends later recalled that she could not accept that the man she once loved now belonged to someone else. What began as heartbreak turned into an obsession. In late January 2009, Chima fell violently ill after eating a home-cooked meal. The sudden collapse led doctors to suspect poisoning, and detectives soon discovered that a rare, highly toxic plant substance had been added to the food. The investigation quickly pointed to the person who knew him best, the woman who still had keys to his house, and who had recently spoken of being replaced. When officers searched Lakhvir Kaur Singh's home, they found traces of the same substance stored in her refrigerator. The motive, investigators said, was simple and tragic: jealousy, rejection, and a desire to make him suffer as she had suffered. In 2010 she was found guilty of murder at the Old Bailey and sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 23 years. The judge described her actions as a carefully planned act of revenge, a moment of anger that destroyed 3 lives, the victim's, his new partner's, and her own. Her case became one of Britain's most infamous examples of a love triangle that spiraled into tragedy, a reminder that when love turns to obsession, emotion can become the most dangerous weapon of all. Stephen Anthony Searle was a former UKIP councillor and ex-Royal Marine from Suffolk. To the outside world, he appeared to be a proud husband, father, and public figure, a man respected in his community. But behind closed doors, a family secret was tearing everything apart. Stephen had been having an affair, not with a stranger, but with his own son's partner, a woman named Anastasia Pomiateva. The revelation shattered the Searle household. His wife, Anne, who had shared decades of marriage and raised 3 sons with him, discovered the truth in 2017. The discovery brought years of tension, betrayal, and humiliation to the surface. Friends later told investigators that Anne felt broken and publicly embarrassed, while Stephen showed little remorse. Arguments between them became routine, small disputes that masked deep emotional wounds. What once looked like a stable marriage had turned into a slow collapse built on lies and resentment. In December 2017, the situation reached its tragic end. Police were called to the family home in Stowmarket after a disturbing emergency call. When officers arrived, they found Anne dead, and Stephen claiming it was an accident. But evidence at the scene and Stephen's own recorded call to emergency services revealed what really happened. During the trial at Ipswich Crown Court, prosecutors described a man who had lost control when confronted with the consequences of his betrayal. The defense argued it was a moment of rage, not premeditation. But the jury saw it differently. In July 2018, Stephen Searle was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 14 years. The judge condemned his actions as a cruel act of domination, saying he had destroyed not only his wife's life, but also his family's trust and dignity. Today, the case of Stephen and Searle remains one of Britain's most shocking domestic tragedies, a story where love, betrayal, and power collided in a household that appeared ordinary until it was too late. Samantha Eastwood was a 28-year-old midwife from Stoke-on-Trent, a woman known for her kindness, dedication, and calm personality. She worked long shifts at Royal Stoke University Hospital, helping others bring life into the world. But away from the hospital corridors, her own life had become complicated. Samantha had been engaged to a man named John Peake. Their relationship ended, but not completely, because John's brother-in-law, Michael Sterling, began seeing Samantha in secret. What started as a quiet affair soon turned into a tangled web of guilt, resentment, and emotional instability. To Michael, Samantha wasn't just a former partner's ex-fiancée, she had become an obsession. By the summer of 2018, tensions were high. Samantha had reportedly tried to end all contact with Michael, but he refused to let go. Friends later said she feared things were getting out of control. On July 27, 2018, Samantha disappeared. Her colleagues grew concerned when she didn't show up for her shift at the hospital. Calls went unanswered, and her car remained parked outside her home. Within hours, Staffordshire police launched a missing person investigation, one that soon captured national attention. Michael Sterling, who had been helping the family search, quickly became a suspect. Detectives noticed inconsistencies in his statements and behavior. Days later, his story fell apart. Following intense questioning, he confessed to killing Samantha during what he called a moment of rage. On December 3, 2018, Sterling appeared at Stafford Crown Court. He pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 17 years before parole. The judge described it as an act driven by obsession and anger, a crime that destroyed 2 families and left a community in grief. For those who knew Samantha, the tragedy was impossible to understand. She had devoted her life to helping others, yet lost her own life to someone who claimed to love her. Her story stands as a chilling reminder of how quickly emotion can turn violent when love becomes possessive. Fred and Rose West appeared, at first glance, to be an ordinary married couple from Gloucestershire. They lived in a modest house at 25, Cromwell Street, Gloucester, raised children, and blended into everyday British life. But behind their closed doors, the couple hid one of the darkest partnerships in the history of British crime. Fred met Rose in the late 1960s when she was just a teenager. He was older, manipulative, and already had a reputation for violence. From the start, their relationship was built not on love, but on control. Rose quickly fell under his influence, and, together, they created a bond that fed on dominance, secrecy, and cruelty. Throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, the West's home became a place of fear for those who entered it. Neighbors noticed the strange comings and goings, but few could imagine the horror unfolding inside. When police finally searched the property in 1994, they uncovered evidence of a string of killings, crimes that had spanned decades. Fred West was arrested first, and during the investigation he revealed that his wife Rose had been involved. As detectives pieced together the timeline, they realized that many of the victims were young women who had trusted the couple, sometimes even living in their home as lodgers or employees. It was a partnership in crime, one that thrived on shared secrecy and control. Fred West died before his trial could take place. Rose West faced a lengthy court process that shocked the entire nation. In 1995, she was convicted of 10 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, one of the rare whole-life tariffs ever issued to a woman in Britain. Today, Rose West remains in prison. Her name has become synonymous with manipulation, cruelty, and the kind of relationship that turns two people into something far more dangerous together than they ever were alone. The case of Fred and Rose West stands as one of the most chilling examples of a partnership built not on love, but on shared evil, a reminder that sometimes, the worst monsters come in pairs. In December 1996, Britain was stunned by the story of a young woman who said she and her fiancé had been attacked on a quiet country road. Tracy Andrews, a 27-year-old former model and nightclub worker, told police that a mysterious driver had forced their car to stop, argued with them, and then stabbed her partner, Lee Harvey. The nation followed the case with sympathy. Andrews gave tearful press conferences, describing the alleged road rage attacker and pleading for help to catch him. But detectives quickly noticed that her version of events didn't add up. Witness timelines clashed with her story, there were no signs of the other car she described, and the physical evidence pointed somewhere much closer to home. Within days, suspicion turned toward Tracy herself. Investigators discovered a turbulent relationship between Tracy Andrews and Lee Harvey, marked by jealousy, arguments, and emotional volatility. Friends later recalled that the couple's love often flipped into rage. When officers re-examined her statements, they found contradictions she could not explain. After several days of questioning, the story of the phantom killer collapsed. Andrews was charged with Lee Harvey's murder and went on trial at Birmingham Crown Court in 1997. Prosecutors said the killing was the final act of a violent argument between two lovers whose relationship had spiraled out of control. In July 1997, the jury found her guilty. She was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 14 years. For years afterward, the road rage murder case remained one of Britain's most memorable examples of a fabricated story built to hide the truth. Andrews eventually admitted her guilt while serving her sentence. She was released on license in 2011, legally changing her name and disappearing from public life. The case became a symbol of how quickly passion can turn to violence, and how lies told in the name of love can unravel under the weight of evidence. In 2016, the quiet seaside town of Chester was shaken by a story that sounded more like a film than real life. Two women, Sarah Williams and Katrina Walsh, had spent more than a year planning the death of another woman. Their motive was simple but deadly: jealousy, rejection, and a man who had become the center of a twisted love triangle. Sarah Williams was a 35-year-old riding instructor from Chester. She had once been in a relationship with a wealthy businessman named David Edwards, but he had moved on, finding happiness with a new partner, Sadie Hartley, a successful businesswoman known for her intelligence and warmth. To most people, the breakup would have been the end of a romance. For Sarah, it became an obsession. Sarah's closest friend, Katrina Walsh, a 56-year-old horse-riding enthusiast, became her accomplice. The two women began planning what they described in messages as a perfect revenge. They bought equipment, studied routines, and meticulously tracked Sadie's life. Katrina kept diaries that later became vital evidence, chilling records of their plans written in her own handwriting. On January 14, 2016, Sarah Williams carried out the attack while Katrina Walsh waited nearby to help her escape. When police examined phone data, CCTV footage, and the diary entries, the truth came together piece by piece. Both women were arrested within days. During the trial at Preston Crown Court, the prosecution described a murder driven entirely by jealousy and obsession. Sadie Hartley, they said, had done nothing more than fall in love with the wrong man, and become the target of another woman's rage. In August 2016, both Sarah Williams and Katrina Walsh were found guilty of murder. Williams was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 30 years, and Walsh received 25 years. The judge called the crime cold, calculated, and shocking beyond words. The case quickly became known as the Horsewomen Killers, two friends whose shared bitterness turned into an unthinkable act. Today, the story of Sarah Williams and Katrina Walsh stands as one of the UK's most chilling examples of how jealousy can destroy not only lives, but humanity itself. Two women, one motive, and a friendship that turned deadly in the name of love. Fawzia Javed, a 31-year-old lawyer from Leeds, had built a life rooted in independence, ambition, and service. She studied law, volunteered for her community, and was described by family and friends as kind, thoughtful, someone who made her own way. Her marriage to Kashif Anwar in December 2020 seemed like the next step in a new chapter. But behind the smiles and the wedding photos, a far darker story was unfolding. Kashif's behavior grew increasingly controlling. Fawzia confided in her family that she felt trapped, that her husband resented her career and sought to limit her freedom. As her independence grew, his hostility deepened. In September 2021, Fawzia was about 17 weeks pregnant and had resolved to leave the marriage and raise her child on her own if necessary. She arranged to spend a weekend away in Edinburgh with Kashif, a trip that would end in tragedy. On September 2, 2021, during a walk near the landmark Arthur's Seat, Kashif pushed Fawzia from the cliff's edge. She fell around 50 feet, and despite being rushed to hospital, she and her unborn baby did not survive. Witnesses later confirmed Fawzia's final words, spoken to a passerby, "Don't let my husband near me, he pushed me." The Guardian. +1. Investigators pieced together a chilling pattern, recordings of threats, theft from her bank account while she was asleep, and furniture in the house moved to isolate her from help. "If you died in childbirth," Kashif had told her, "that would be okay, I would be free," a colleague later testified. The Guardian. In April 2023, the High Court in Edinburgh convicted Kashif Anwar of her murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 20 years. The Guardian. Fawzia's story became symbolic of the darkest side of domestic control and the betrayal of trust. She was a woman who sought freedom, whose ambition and independence challenged the very person she trusted most. And in the end, that choice took everything from her. Laura Stewart was a 33-year-old nurse from Denbigh, North Wales. To everyone who knew her, she was vibrant, kind, and loved by her patients. But behind her smile, Laura was living through something she had tried to hide, a relationship that had become possessive, unpredictable, and frightening. She had been in a long-term relationship with Jason Cooper, a local man known around town. At first, he seemed charming, devoted, protective, always wanting to be near her. But as time passed, that protection turned into surveillance. He questioned who she spoke to, what she wore, and where she went. When Laura tried to spend time with friends or family, he accused her of betrayal. By 2017, Laura had finally decided she wanted to end things. She told close friends she was done with the constant arguments and control, she wanted peace. But Cooper couldn't accept it. He believed if he couldn't have her, no one could. He began following her, showing up at her workplace, and sending threats masked as apologies. In August 2017, only weeks after she ended the relationship, Laura was walking home with a friend in Denby when Cooper attacked her in public. The community was horrified, neighbors rushed to help, but it was too late. Laura died shortly after in hospital. Her friend was injured but survived. Police quickly arrested Jason Cooper. During his trial at Mold Crown Court, jurors heard about months of stalking and emotional abuse leading up to the murder. Prosecutors said Cooper's actions were the final act of obsession and control. In 2018, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 31 years. The judge called the crime a senseless act of cruelty, rooted in jealousy and ownership. After her death, Laura's family and colleagues began a public campaign for stronger laws protecting victims of coercive control. Her story helped highlight the warning signs of domestic abuse long before it turns violent. Laura Stewart's legacy now lives in education and awareness, a reminder that love without respect can quickly become dangerous, and that courage to leave should never be met with punishment.